Greg Hardy is set to make his second appearance in the UFC this weekend when the Octagon touches down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida on Saturday night. Back in January this year when he made his promotional debut, much to the dismay of the vast majority of fans and pundits, Hardy was in the co-main event slot, a position in which nobody seemed to think he deserved to be in. Not just because of where he stood in terms of the hierarchy of the heavyweight division, but primarily because of his past of, at one time, being up on criminal charges of domestic violence and his subsequent suspension from the NFL. Full disclosure, I don't know a single thing about football. I grew up playing, eating, sleeping, and breathing hockey and followed it religiously, and still play the game to this day, but that's the only sport I know anything about aside from combat sports. Point being, the first time I've ever even heard of Greg Hardy was back when, a year or so ago, I got wind of a former NFL player making on the Dana White's Contender Series. A former NFL player that had a checkered past, to say the least. What I'm trying to say is that back in 2014, when news broke in the sports world of the alleged attacks and when this considerable controversy was front page news for a meaningful period of time, I wasn't even aware of it. I didn't live through it, so I'm acknowledging that perhaps if I did, my opinion on this matter may be different if I've experienced it all in real time. The first time I've ever read detail and looked at pictures from this whole ordeal was about 10 minutes ago, so bear that in mind as we move forward, as I think it has an impact on my judgment for better or for worse. Needless to say, the alleged actions are as terrible as it gets. Violence outside the cage truly churns my stomach in any case, whether it be a street fight in a parking lot between two or more males, or whatever the case may be. It really bothers me, that sort of thing. But it's especially wretched when there are women involved. Never mind when a woman is on the receiving end of such actions. So I totally understand the disdain a lot of the fan base and the media have for Hardy because of this. And I get why many feel as though he sure as hell shouldn't be in the privileged position of being under the spotlight of a co-main event for the second time on ESPN. I've seen some people on the forums and in the Twitterverse saying he shouldn't be there because there are many other more deserving fighters. And is that the case? Perhaps. But to act as though that sort of thing doesn't happen week in and week out would be ludicrous. Do you think Paige Van Zandt and Michelle Waterson were more deserving of the main event slot on UFC on Fox 22 over UFC Hall of Famer Uriah Faber or UK MMA legend Brad Pickett or Alan Jouban or Mike Perry? Were they in that position over those fighters because their contributions to the sport spanned over a longer period of time and because they've had more storied career wins over more notable competition? Of course not. They are in that position because of the entertainment factor to the casual viewer, for the most part. And by the way, this isn't a slight on either of those girls. Watterson is a legit veteran in this game, and Van Zandt has demonstrated that she's a fighter with skills and true toughness. But the reality is, in the current landscape we're in, it's not about the hierarchy of champions, contenders, and the most skilled mixed martial artists being on display. It's about selling entertainment. And like it or not, Greg Hardy has an appeal right now that not many currently have. And the more people talk about it and make a big deal about it, the more it'll ensure he continues to get those spots on the card. I don't like that it's this way, by the way. Anybody who's ever paid attention to my work in the past knows that I hate that this is the case, but I've come to accept it. Skill-wise, Hardy doesn't leave the audience in awe of his technical prowess on the feet, and especially not on the ground. But he does have massive, massive power, and the highest level of coaching being under American top team's Din Thomas. After watching his last fight for the second time, it's clear he's green in this game and that he needs to be more patient and conservative with the use of his cardio. But aside from that, if he keeps his focus on improving and provided he gets the right matchups, in a few years' time, we could have a legitimate contender on our hands. There's also the fact that heavyweights in MMA tend to hit their prime a fair bit later in life than most other divisions. Daniel Cormier didn't even start his MMA career until he was Hardy's age, for example. So he's actually ahead of DC in terms of experience in relation to his age at this point. Should Hardy be in the co-main event slot? No. But should his past define who he is as a person for the rest of his life and be given no second chance to redeem himself? Also no. Martial arts in general has been the catalyst to many people turning their lives around for the better. Just look across the UFC roster for all the stories we've seen over the years. In my opinion, if there's one endeavor that any troubled individual could take up that could create real change in their lives, it's martial arts. So although I don't agree with the allegations of his past, and I also don't agree with any fighter with less than 5 fights being on the main card of any UFC event, I'm not going to condemn the guy for the rest of his days. I'm going to choose to be optimistic of his future in this sport, and hopefully he can turn the tables and maybe even end up making a great example of what good that martial arts can do for a person.